Hey everyone, welcome to the live stream. This is a Q&A live stream that I just kind of felt like doing. So if you have any questions, if you just want to hang out, chat about hopefully things that aren't coronavirus, but we'll see. Then yeah, I'll be here for like the next hour, and I will start with, let me grab my iPad. Oh, okay. Some of you asked some questions in some of my community posts, so I will start with those questions for those of you who might not be here to have them answered. So, oh, that's nice. The first question I got is, how are you doing? I'm pretty good. Yeah, I have been in Boston the whole time, and that's certainly been interesting since we were the third hardest hit state in the US when it comes to COVID. Also, if you hear any background noise, there's people doing construction in my apartment, so sorry about that. The last time I tried to do this with headphones on, the sound didn't go through, so I don't want to do anything that might cause issues with that. So I decided not to use headphones this time. Anyway, but yeah, I've been good. I actually just got one pair of 20-pound dumbbells, which I'm super excited for because that means that I can start lifting again, which I've missed so much during this whole thing. But yeah, no, I think I've been pretty lucky that, my research hasn't been too severely impacted by all of this. And we're starting to hear rumors about plans to go back to campus in the near future. So we shall see what happens. Actually, let me type in the chat, that way people know. Questions. The E key on my laptop stopped working, or kind of works. Questions. Okay, there we go. Yeah, the E key on my laptop stopped working right before quarantine started because of course, and it was extremely annoying because it meant that now typing things is very difficult. Another question somebody had was, you started outside of the AI world and then applied it to your field. Because of the versatility of AI, this could be done in almost any field, I assume. Do you have any suggestions for how and when to reach for an AI solution to a problem in a field? How did you get started, and what shortcuts can you not take? So I think that, I guess there's a lot of thought that could go into kind of how and when to reach for an AI solution to a problem. I definitely think that unless you're in a research setting, or part of doing research is just learning the new thing that you're going to have to learn anyway. I wouldn't really recommend, reaching for it yourself necessarily if it's not something that you know how to do, because you're just going to spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to do the thing that you want when you could just pay someone to do it for you. So if you have a problem that you think might be solved by AI, then that might be a good time to reach out to people who do AI consulting, and see whether or not they think it's something that you would reasonably use AI for, and kind of see how much time they think it would take and what their rates are, and do a cost-benefit analysis on what you think your time is worth versus what you think you could reasonably get done. In terms of how I got started, so I got started because I was at Stanford doing research, and so the whole point was to gain skills like this. And there was a lot more, not necessarily room for error in terms of you wouldn't publish something that's wrong, but it was assumed that it would take a while for me to catch up to the curve and figure out how to do the thing that I wanted to do. And that was just part of the process. And in terms of shortcuts you cannot take, ideally don't take any shortcuts. That's hard. I think that that's just very, very dependent on the problem that you're trying to solve, because with different problems you can take different shortcuts reasonably, and so it's going to really depend on what you're trying to do and what you're willing to sacrifice to get that thing done. For anyone who's new to the chat, hi. Somebody asked what the topic is today. There is no topic. It's whatever you want to ask me. Same as pretty much every Q&A live stream. So reply with your questions in the chat, and I'm just going through some of the ones that people asked in the community tab until you guys ask me a question instead. So somebody else asked, what do you think about Elon Musk's view that AI may surpass us very soon? I don't really agree with that. I haven't seen any evidence of that. I think that we have more pressing concerns when it comes to AI development and how it's going to impact us in the near future. And I don't think that AI taking over because it became smarter than us is that high on the list of immediate concerns. So yeah, that's my diplomatic answer. And then, what are the most common misconceptions about AI and machine learning? At some point, I may or may not do a video on this. It would have to be like a vlog, or like maybe I'll start a vlog channel or something. I don't know. But AI is this extremely useless term. Like, it doesn't tell you anything meaningful about the thing that you're trying to develop, and it's not, I think, bad, but it's not descriptive, because it can mean all these different things and it's used all these different ways, and it doesn't actually tell you all that much about whatever algorithm or system you're actually talking about, because sometimes you're talking about one algorithm, and sometimes you're talking about 10 algorithms, and sometimes you're talking about a person who's sitting behind a desk across an ocean from you that you can't see. And so yeah, so I think that one of the big ones is definitely that, like, machine learning is like a field where you train algorithms, and AI is kind of this umbrella term that encapsulates a lot of things and mostly brings with it a lot of hype. So yeah, I think that that's probably the biggest misconception, that, in my opinion anyway. Oh, we have a question from Kyle. I'm starting my PhD this fall with focus in computer vision. What advice do you have for maintaining a healthy work-life balance during grad school? I'm like the worst example of maintaining work-life balance during grad school, for being honest. I guess I would say, for those of you who don't know, but like I would imagine that none of you know this, unless you've like looked at my LinkedIn or something. Like, YouTube is not the only extracurricular, although at this point it is effectively a second job. It's not the only thing that I do outside of my research. So I also am on the MIT Grad Student Council, now on the executive committee, running the External Affairs Board, doing policy outreach for grad students. Number one way to get paid for except we put deep learning in the title. If you submit to Nature, pretty much. Is what I've learned in the last like 2 years of being in grad school. There was this very fun deep learning for medicine phase where it was like, if you just put deep learning in front of it, they'll accept it and they'll publish it for you, even though they like used linear regression to predict on some data. And we're all just sitting there like, oh. Anyway, but yeah, so I work with the MIT Grad Student Council. I'm also one of the co-founders of MIT's New Science Policy Journal. So like, my big recommendation for work-life balance is like, don't join like 6 different things simultaneously. Like, if there's a club fair or something like that at your school, you know, scout around, see what interests you, and then like spend like a month or two like just being a grad student, like not doing anything else, and see kind of how much free time you have, what you want to spend that time doing, and then pick one thing and do that. And, you know, do that for like a couple of months, see how well it fits to your schedule, and then if you're comfortable adding on another thing, you can then do that. And so I think that, you know, just don't dive in too fast, because you're just going to get overwhelmed. And at the end of the day, like even for me, at the end of the day, my main job is being a PhD student. And so even though like this is now a business, like I have an LLC for this channel, even though this is a business, it's like still my side job at the end of the day. And so the PhD always comes first. So making sure you're not committing to too many things where you then can't kind of focus on your main goals is really important. And some people, you know, do all the things and then realize that, you know, maybe they didn't actually want to do the PhD. I know a lot of people who have found themselves in that position, and that's okay too. But I think just make sure you know where your priorities lie and know kind of like if it's 10 p.m. the night before, you have 5 things that you have to get done and you only have time to do 2 of them. Like, what are the 2 things that you're going to do? Because, like, for me, if it's like I have to do something for, lab, something for classes, and then something for YouTube and something for like the GSC, like YouTube and the GSC are the things that are going to be late. And that's just kind of where my priorities are. But I try not to put myself in that situation because it just makes my life harder. Next question. Have you ever seen a study or paper get published that you didn't think should have been? Yeah. I don't know if there are any that come to mind off the top of my head. Well, okay, I'll put it like this. I don't know that there are any papers that I've seen that I think like straight up should not have been published. There are some papers that I've read where I think that, there were certain experiments that they also should have done, or maybe they, overstepped their bounds in terms of like what they extrapolated from their results. I've definitely seen stuff like that before. Yeah, I think especially it's always a little bit hard to say because before like websites like Archive, you couldn't see the stuff that didn't make it through the peer review process, and now you can. And peer review isn't perfect by any means, but now that I've seen what they reject, I kind of have a better understanding of what gets published. So yeah, there's definitely stuff that I've seen where I'm like there maybe this needed another round of review before it went live. But yeah, I don't know. I've probably read papers that I like straight up thought shouldn't have been published at all. But those are definitely like few and far between, and they usually tend to be not because of bad science per se, but like when you get into the people who basically do like eugenics or like stuff like that, where it's just like this just like we don't need this in the world. It's okay. We don't need this. Okay, next question. If you were to allow your imagination to run wild, what tech would you like to see developed in the next 20 years that will benefit humanity the most? I mean, something to fix climate change. Like that, I mean, currently our biggest immediate issue is this pandemic. But like, I think my generation's biggest issue is climate change. And so something, I don't know, like, I don't know what tech that is. I'm actually supposed to be collabing with someone else on a video about that at some point, but it was supposed to come out this Friday, and then we were both like, oh, wait, that's not going to happen. So I think that, yeah, something that could fix climate change, and I don't know what that is, and I don't know enough about the field to really speak further than that, but I think that that's kind of the big issue of our time right now. Next question. Control software for satellites. As a general rule, so if you have like really specific machine learning problems, that's not necessarily something that I'm going to address in a live stream just because it's like not a simple answer. Like I can't necessarily, that's a discussion. That's not something that I can necessarily answer in like a couple sentences. If you're looking for like pointers on places to look in terms of like resources, I would have to think about it. Because that's like common filtering is stuff that I learned in classes. And for whatever reason, MIT like doesn't do textbooks in our classes. Is what actually neither did Cornell. Is what I've learned in 6 years of higher education. Is that I actually had a surprisingly few number of textbooks. Yeah, I would have to think about that a little bit in terms of like resources that I could point you to. But past that, I think it's hard to give any like specific project-specific machine learning advice without like having a conversation about whatever the project is. Next question: how did you make the transition from undergrad to master's, and how did you go about finding a dissertation topic? How did I make the transition? I applied. I don't know. So I guess I knew pretty early on in undergrad that I was probably going to go for a PhD. I'd been doing research since my junior year of high school, first at my local first at my local institution, my state school, and then at Columbia during my senior year. And so I was pretty sure that I was going to do research. The question was kind of like, do I want to do a master's? Do I just want to go straight to the PhD? And I waffled on that for a while in undergrad because I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure what else one did with a PhD that wasn't become a professor, and I didn't want to become a professor. And so I was debating, you know, do I do like a master's? Do I do a master's to see if I then want to do the PhD? Because I'd been doing research for about 3.5 years in one lab as an undergrad. So I think, I guess in terms of like step-by-step things, how did I make the transition? I stayed in the same lab for like 3.5 years as an undergrad. I had diverse research experiences. So I had an internship at Novartis in data science. I had I spent my first summer on campus in my lab, and then I spent a summer at Stanford doing machine learning research. And that combined with letters of rec from all those people that I worked with, and then just like taking the GRE and, you know, doing all the other administrative stuff that you kind of have to deal with, helped me figure out that I had done tissue engineering as an undergrad, and I realized that I kind of wanted to do something more on the ECS side of things. And so I started looking for programs that did that. And my biggest recommendation for like looking for programs is honestly that like prestige matters, but research matters more. Like, don't go to a place where they don't have people who want to do what you want to do, because like I mentioned in last week's video, time is a flat circle. Last week's video, I think. Like I mentioned in the video about that paper on how to do research at the MIT AI lab, the emotional labor of like research is ridiculous, especially for PhD students, because it's like your whole job to like push against the limits of human knowledge, and you don't want to do that on a topic you don't like. So, you know, I got lucky in that the topic that I'm interested in also happens to be at Harvard and MIT, so I get to get a degree from MIT, which is super cool. But like, if there had been somewhere else, and this almost was a problem for me when I was applying, because I ended up deciding between I thought that I was going to have to decide between a different program at MIT and another school that's lower ranked than MIT, and I was leaning really heavily towards the other school because the research was just much more in line with what I wanted to do. So that's how I'd say you make the transition. How do you go about finding a dissertation topic? For me, I basically talked to a bunch of different PIs about the topics that they had going on and found one that was interesting to me. And I mean, my thesis topic isn't actually quite nailed down yet. It'll get a little more nailed down when I do quals next year, but even then it's not like fully nailed down until you defend. But yeah, that's how I found a dissertation topic. I'm gonna quickly let Patrick jump the line. How did the cinnamon bread from yesterday turn out? It turned out really good. Let me see if I can find a picture of it. So I made cinnamon swirl bread because I was out of bread, and you can't go to like grocery stores anymore. So I made cinnamon swirl bread, and it came out looking amazing. The swirl even came out good. I was so proud of myself. So yeah, it turned out very well. I had it for breakfast this morning, toasted with some butter. 10 out of 10. Very good. Next question. Do you think social bubbles on the internet are a thing, and what do you think we should do to stop their effects? So first question, yes. Second question, I think that they're not all bad. On some, like there are definitely, you know, social bubbles where there's just people who like need support for things that they've experienced or things that they're going through that like they wouldn't be able to access because of where they live or because of the resources that are available to them or something like that. So I don't necessarily think that they're all bad. I think that the problem that you run into is then, coalitions of people with ideas that may become dangerous to other people. That's when you start to have problems. So I think that a lot of that doesn't come from necessarily stopping the social bubbles. It comes from educating everyone, and making sure like critical thinking is a skill that people have, because currently it's really not. And it's a skill that has to be taught. Like, you have to learn how to think critically. And I think that that's kind of one of the places where, at least in the US, the educational system could stand to be improved. And I think that stuff like critical thinking, evidence-based decision making will help to alleviate some of the issues that you run into with social bubbles, where people refuse to kind of acknowledge things that are outside of their viewpoint. But yeah, I don't necessarily think that you should get rid of them. I think that they've been great sources of support for people who otherwise wouldn't have had it. I just think that, anytime a group of people becomes dangerous to another group of people, you kind of have to think about, like, where is that coming from? Where do the ideals that cause those feelings come from? And kind of how can you address those belief systems before you kind of pop the bubble itself, I guess. Because if you try to destroy the bubble itself, it's just going to make everyone who's in the bubble pissed, and that doesn't actually solve your problem at all. Thank you. That bread did. I can actually post the recipe if I can find it again. I've had a bunch of people ask me about it. That's the bread recipe. Next thing. Being from MIT, do I subscribe to any of Ray Kurzweil's ideas on the singularity? So I'm not super familiar with his ideals, if I'm being honest. CSAIL is a whole separate entity from where I spend 90% of my time. So I'm familiar with some of the big people at MIT for AI research. But doing a quick Google search. Okay, I'm not, oh, that's fun. The comp neuro stuff in particular is fun. Yeah, there's a whole fight in like computational neuroscience versus like the rest of neuroscience. Not necessarily the rest of neuroscience, but basically on whether or not the brain can actually be modeled using machine learning and things like that, and more specifically whether it makes sense to model something that you don't understand with something that you don't understand, and whether or not that tells you anything useful about it. I tend to lean towards the sure, why not side of things. I think that computational neuroscience is a super interesting field where you get to both kind of learn about the models themselves as well as about how similar the models are to the dynamics of the brain. And I think that, there's just a lot of fascinating stuff that comes out of that. in terms of stuff like transhumanism, like singularity focused AI, human integration, and whatnot, kind of referring back to an earlier question, I honestly think that we're a little bit too early to be talking about that. And I don't necessarily like looking through the stuff that this guy's written on this. A lot of it was written like a while back, so I don't necessarily think that it was wild to speculate about stuff like that. But I think that 30 years later, with more information, you adjust your hypothesis. And my current hypothesis is that, interesting idea, but we don't necessarily know enough about both the brain and AI to really pull it off. Ooh, I have a fan from India. That's exciting. Hi. Who are all of the researchers that I follow in the field of deep learning? Would be nice if you said a few words about each one. I don't know if there are any like specific people that I follow on a regular basis. Like there's the people I follow on Twitter, and I think I follow like most of like big deep learning figures on Twitter just to see kind of like what's going on more broadly in the field. But a lot of the machine learning that I follow is actually more in the comp neuro area of machine learning, just because it's like a lot more pertinent to what I do on a day-to-day basis. Who do I think is cool? Because like the people that are coming to mind, like off the top of my head, when it comes to like papers that I would have Google Scholar alerts for, it's like people like Conrad Cording, or it's like when Gary Marcus decides to get into fights with people on Twitter, which he has good points. The symbolic the symbolic AI argument, I think, is a good one, and I think it's also very interesting. But it also ends up consuming 95% of my Twitter feed, which like isn't great. I actually have to read his book. Let me know if you guys want a AI book review video. I don't know why that word took so long to come to my mind. Because I read a few of the big AI books, but like I've been meaning to have a reason to blow through all the other ones, so that might be fun. But yeah, rebooting AI is one of them, because I think that's pretty interesting. But yeah, I don't know if there's like, there aren't names that come to mind, I guess, is my thing. And that's been me for like every single field I've ever worked in. Like I'm horrible at remembering the authors on papers. People would be like, yeah, you know that paper by like so-and-so? And I'm like, what paper? And they're like, the paper about X. And I'm like, okay. But remembering the actual names of people for whatever reason, it's just like, doesn't happen. Probably the ADHD or something. I don't know. You mentioned that you don't want to be a professor, so are there certain industries, companies that are doing research that you are interested in? Yeah, I think that, so the places that come to mind, I mean, OpenAI obviously first, but that's partially because I just know a ton of people at OpenAI and they're cool people. Google X also comes to mind, actually. My, I guess, ideal post-PhD job is something where I can still do this, where I can still do YouTube, and where I can also like just get my hands dirty. Like I would like to essentially continue being a PhD student and doing like these very high risk, high reward projects, while also making significantly more money. And so places like Google X, maybe working for one of the big like Microsoft Research or like something like that, working at like Apple in their biotech division. All of those sound like they'd be super fun jobs to me. Verily seemed like a great place to work. Of course, with that comes the like ethical side of things, which is like Google's ethics track record is like kind of hit or miss. And so do you go work at this company in spite of the fact that their moral compass may be a little bit in a different direction than yours is, even if like the job description is kind of exactly what you want to do. So Yeah, that's what I'm thinking right now, but I'm also a second year, and actually, we found this paper that might expedite some of my research once things open back up, which is very exciting. Um, so maybe I'll be done in 5 years, but like this is a decision that's still like 3 or 4 years out. So we'll see. Yeah, X is super cool. They do an AI residency, and I interviewed for it last year, but ended up um, pulling out of the interview process because it didn't make sense research wise to leave for the summer. Um, but I really want to go there, and my PIs are cool with it. So maybe you'll get a summer vlog series of what it's like to work at Google X. I don't know. That would be super cool. Do you think the rising prevalence of AI is going to have a significant impact on people in the IT support industry career? Dramatic shift in the way support is provided. Oh yeah, Allen Institute would also be cool. The problem is that postdocing doesn't make a ton of sense for me. Because I've talked to some people I know who did PhD and then went into industry, and the general consensus that I've heard so far is that like post PhD doing the postdoc doesn't add any years of practical experience when it comes to moving into other positions. So I'd rather just get like the full job and kind of call it a day. Jumping back to the IT question. I guess yes and no. So you're always going to need somebody to manage the computers. And so I think that jobs like that will definitely still be around. On the other side, I think that you've definitely seen like an uptick in like AI chatbot customer service kind of stuff. And so I think that, you'll probably see a change in that part of, you'll probably see a change in kind of that side of IT. But at the end of the day, like if the computer overheats or the fan breaks or whatever, like you're always going to need a person to handle those things. So I do think that a lot of especially anything hardware specific, I think is probably okay for now. And most, I guess, non-consumer facing software positions are also probably okay for the time being, because while you don't necessarily need as many people to interact with other people, you do still need people to like debug your software and whatnot. I think I've gone through all the questions. Oh, somebody asked me earlier if I consult with startups and nonprofits. I don't. Mostly because I have no like formal consulting experience, so that just seems like, I don't know. It's weird in my mind, even though I like have this YouTube channel. It is odd in my mind that someone would ask me to consult for them. Any other questions? Oh, by the way, there's if any of you watch 12 Tones channel, they are doing a video on OpenAI's Jukebox this week, which is their AI algorithm that can generate music either based on genre or based on completing song lyrics, and it like sounds like music. It doesn't sound like weird, or it doesn't sound weird for like the first like 6 or 7 seconds. And I am doing a cameo in that video, so you should go check that out because it's super cool video. It's super interesting. They're going to go through like kind of the whole history of music generation, like algorithmic music generation, which is super interesting because it's such a hard problem. And I'm going to talk specifically about Jukebox and how encoding works and things like that. So check that video out. Much less AI focused. Cats or dogs? Cats. I'm a cat person. I had cats growing up. Never had dogs. But I've always, not always, I had cats basically from middle school on. And I don't have a cat now, but I've been thinking about getting one. I'm moving soon. So I don't, want to make any like rash quarantine decisions before moving, but I'm thinking about it. We'll see. Part of the problem is that I travel a lot. So like it doesn't always make sense to have something that depends on you at home. a living creature that depends on you. But that's also kind of why I'd be a little more comfortable getting like a cat over a dog, because at least a cat's a little more self-sufficient. Like as long as it knows to go in the litter box and you leave the food bowl, then it should be fine. We used to leave our cats for a couple days and they're usually okay. Other questions. What else is going on? There was that video on AI exam proctoring has been like blowing up in the relative sense, because for those of you who don't know, my channel sponsorships are managed by Standard, which also houses some much bigger YouTube channels than mine, like Real Engineering, Tom Frank, channels like that. And so when like they have a video blow up, they're like, it got 10 million views, and I'm like, mine got 7,000, and that's like wild in like a week, 2 weeks. But yeah, it's been interesting to see, because it's mostly a lot of people who want to know how they can cheat on their tests, which is why I intentionally do not provide any advice on that, because you shouldn't cheat on your tests. Other questions? Anybody? Oh, also for those of you who don't know, see, this is why when somebody asked me about work-life balance, I was like, I'm a really bad example of it. I do a fortnightly, every other week, Dungeons and Dragons game called Nature Check on Twitch. I was invited to be part of this, not month, one of their new campaigns. And we normally play on Sundays, so normally we'd be playing on this Sunday, but we're actually moving it up to Saturday because one of the people in our game has a conflict. But if you want to watch some grad students / YouTubers play Dungeons and Dragons, then you can do that, and it's fun. A lot of us are so we're actually playing Powered by the Apocalypse, so it's not actually D&D, but it's I think most of us, like I used to play fourth edition, probably fourth edition, in high school. And so I like understand how D&D works, but I'm also super rusty of it. And I also didn't play Powered by the Apocalypse. So it's been interesting to see us all like relearn how to play D&D in real time on a live stream, but it's been going pretty well. It's been a lot of fun. It's going pretty well. I think that's all the major announcements, because any events that I would normally have been canceled so far. Because what was I supposed to go to? ThinkerCon was like supposed to be a month ago, which I was really excited for. That was going to be a lot of fun. What else? There's probably some stuff for the summer. EduCon wasn't going to happen this year because YouTube wasn't planning on doing it like well before coronavirus happened. But that's okay. Conferences are canceled. I mean, not canceled. Like Society for Neuroscience is still saying that we're having SFN in DC, and all of us are kind of like, are we? This seems unlikely, but we'll see what happens. I'm guessing, oh man, I don't even know what NeurIPS is going to do. NeurIPS has so many people. Like, that would be, even, assuming that this all calms down by December, like, that's one of those conferences that you go to when you get sick, not during a pandemic. Like, you getting, like, NeurIPS flu is, like, a thing. So that'll be interesting. We'll see. I don't think that they can have that one in person because like AAAS just canceled or went virtual. And I don't know how that's going to work. If I play D&D, did I touch Magic the Gathering? I did not. No. I don't know. I never got into Magic the Gathering. I feel like I got into like D&D, like bridge. Yeah, I wasn't a huge like video game person. I wasn't a huge gamer person outside of things like D&D and like strategy card games and stuff like that. Do I think big data applied to bioinformatics will further his research? See, I always have to Google people's names because chances are I actually do know what this is, but practically speaking. Oh, I have heard of this. I don't know that I assigned it to this name. I guess the answer is maybe. Like, the idea of extending the human lifespan by applying big data to bioinformatics. I don't know. I guess I just don't know what information you'd find. Like, I don't want to say that you wouldn't find anything or that there isn't anything there, but I like literally have no idea what information that you would find that would help you with that problem. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a maybe. Like, it could be useful because you have a larger collection of information on people. But I also like think that maybe you won't find anything, and maybe humans were just meant to die after a certain period of time, and that's okay. I don't know. Research that focuses on extending human lifespan I've always found to be kind of interesting because for a while, like most of the problems, yeah, we're having an algorithm that could sort through the data more efficiently. That could also help a lot. Yeah, I think my big question when it comes to stuff like that isn't like, could you use an algorithm to analyze it? It's like, does analyzing it provide you with any more information than we already have? And I don't know the answer to that. So, I think it's worth a try. I think you'd probably find something interesting, even if it isn't something that makes us all live until we're 1,000. But I also think that a lot of the things that we figured out were curtailing the human lifespan in the past were things like hygiene and things like medical advancements. And there does seem to be a point where none of those things help. And your body just wears out, like it physically wears out. And I don't know what in that collection of data that we now have on humans would stop that particular problem. So yeah. I don't remember what I was talking about before I answered that question. Let's see, what else goes on? Yeah. Oh, if anyone has like Netflix recommendations, preferably not reality TV. I did the whole like, which one was it? Love is Blind, Too Hot to Handle, Kick, and now I'm kind of over reality television. So if anyone has any other recommendations for stuff to watch. Oh no, not Black Mirror. See, the problem with stuff like Black Mirror is that like when stuff like Black Mirror becomes like slightly more uplifting than like our current reality, it just makes everything worse. No, nothing like hyper realistic, dystopian, whatnot, unless it's like shows like The Magicians are like dystopian, but like, and also the books are better. But they're dystopian in such an unrealistic way that it's fine. Like stuff like Black Mirror and like House of Cards are like just realistic enough to be uncomfortable right now. I don't know. Let's see if you guys had any other questions. Maybe I'll start watching Community. That'd be fun. Also, I know I said that I was going to start making TikToks, and then I had to take final last week, so I didn't. So I am going to try to do that, I guess. It's such an odd platform. I don't think I fully understand it. And there have also been interesting accusations levied at the company for like how the For You page is curated algorithmically and whether or not it's like biased and things like that. I think it actually might be closer to the dating app side of things where, because basically some people have complained that like the app only shows me white people or the app only shows me like Asian people or like whatever. And I'd be curious as to whether it's just amplifying your own personal biases as to the content that you like tend to like, versus like actually actively pushing you towards that content, because that's a super interesting conundrum. Oh, I watched Suits actually. I don't know. I made it to like a season or two before it actually ended. But yeah, I used to watch Suits. Maybe I'll rewatch Bones. For those who don't know, fun fact, I wanted to be a forensic anthropologist like through high school, before I realized that in most places in the US, that's basically just being a mortician. And that was less interesting to me. Let's see if I can find any other questions from you guys. Oh no, my iPad died. Well, I could just use my phone. Well, otherwise, if you guys don't have any other questions, then I will probably sign off. This was fun. I just felt like doing a Q&A because, you know, we're all still in quarantine, or I guess depending on where you live, actually. You may or may not still be in quarantine. Boston will still be in quarantine until probably early July. I think we just found out about the new rollout plan. And so some businesses can start opening as of Monday, but like the city won't functionally be open until probably late June at the earliest, and even that'll be like limited functionality. So we'll see how this goes. Everybody, you know, stay safe, wear your mask, wash your hands after you touch anything, and, you know, try to stay healthy. Any future collabs to look out for. Besides the one with 12 Tone that comes out on Friday. Oh, that's what I was going to talk about, actually. I'm going to be making a cameo on Professor Dave's channel. I think June 2nd. I have to finish editing that video today, actually, because I am late on that. Oops. But yeah, I'm actually going to be doing a kind of quarantine adapted day in the life of a PhD student. So once that's out, I will definitely let you guys know, so that you guys can check that out. Other than that, I don't think that there are any collabs off the top of my head. Yeah, no. Obviously, if any other like collab with another standard creator comes out, you guys will hear about that. We did game night a while back, so maybe we'll do that again. And that was a lot of fun. But yeah, otherwise, I think that's it. There's definitely like some collabs that, you know, I have been discussing with other people for like a while now, but it ends up being a whole scheduling issue. Like if anyone watches Rohan, MetaLife Crisis, we've been talking about collabing for like a year now. And like I started my PhD, or I started the second year of my PhD, and then he was also working on his PhD, and then coronavirus happened, and now we're both like, yeah, it's not a good time. It's not a good time for this, because he's like, first he got coronavirus, and then now he's still being a real doctor. So that's, you know, a whole thing. And then who else? Miriam was the other one, Miriam Nelson, for a climate change collab that was scheduled on both of our calendars to come out this Friday. And then we both realized that neither of us had actually prepared anything for that collab. So we were like, well, never mind. We'll do it later. So that will also come out at some point. Who knows when? Kyle Hill. Kyle, so when did I meet Kyle? At EduCon last year. This was actually before he had his own channel. So now that he has his own channel, I don't know, that would be interesting. I don't know what we'd talk about. Like, he's a guy I met and talked with in a group for an hour at a conference. So like, I'd also highly doubt he remembers me, which is fine. But yeah, no, that'd be cool. He does cool stuff. Would I collab with Jabrils? Yeah. Me, him, and Up and Adam had actually talked about collabing a while ago. And that ended up being a time zone issue because every time we tried to write, like, so Jade's in Australia and I'm on the East Coast and Jabrils is on the West Coast. And it just wasn't working. So that was like something that we talked about doing and then just never worked out because the timing just never worked out every time we actually tried to do something. I don't even remember what we were going to collab about. But yeah, that'd be cool too. His stuff is so much more project-based than mine. So that would definitely be interesting to talk about what we would want to talk about. But I did notice after Vanessa Hill released her new YouTube original on sleep, he was asking her about getting an EEG device to monitor his own brain signals. So maybe I'll DM him and see if he wants to do something with that. I don't know. Let's see. Thought Emporium. I don't know if I've checked out that channel. Definitely something to look into. But yeah, I found, I mean, at least in the past, most of my collabs have been like either people I already know from the like We Create EDU Slack or now from the standard Slack, or people I met at EduCon. Really, it's people I already knew. Like 9 times out of 10, it's like people I already knew who both of us were like, hey, this would be a cool thing to do a video on. So yeah, I don't know that I've like reached out to any creators to be like, hey, do you want to like do a video with me? And even if I did, I think like collabs that interest me the most are cross-disciplinary collabs. So like that's kind of one of the things with Duro, where it's like we don't do the same thing, but there's enough overlap between the things that we do where like I don't necessarily know that it would make an interesting video. But like collabing with someone who's outside of my discipline so that, you know, she or he or whoever can speak to their expertise and I can speak to mine are the ones that really interested me. So that's why like doing a collab with Rowan is interesting. That's why doing a collab with like Miriam is interesting. A dream collab would probably with someone like Michelle Carre or something doing a like AI fitness challenge. That'd be super cool. But yeah, so collabs are interesting. They're often a lot of work because you have to produce 2 videos when you'd normally be producing 1. So we'll see what happens, especially with the quarantines. But I think that's all the questions. So thanks everybody for coming. Hope you enjoyed this. Stay tuned for this Friday's video, which is going to be an AI 101. And yeah, stay safe. Wash your hands. Try not to get sick. If you got sick, try to feel better. Bye.